Gentlemen, good to see you both. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting us, Sean.
Good. Well,
Yeah,
I
thanks for
appreciate
having
all.
us.
I appreciate all you guys do to keep our country safe, and obviously a big sea change in the last couple months that I want to get into. Before I start, and I'll start with you, Ron. Just the DC and a lot of the liberal media is buzzing because of the case that we've heard a lot about. This I think is Abrego Garcia. He's an El Salvadorian resident. He had a deportation order. Can you just walk people through what the facts are? Because I think when I started hearing this, just for context, I was reading Politico and CNN, and they said Maryland man deported, and I thought to myself, wow, like a guy from Maryland just got deported. That doesn't seem right. And then you find out that, like, yeah, maybe he was technically in Maryland, but he's as much of a Maryland man as I am a Boston Red Sox. It didn't make sense. So, Ron, can you just start us, like, what are the facts that you guys are aware of regarding this individual?
Well, baseline, I can tell you he's from El Salvador. He was adjudicated by an immigration court to be removed. So he was set up by ICE and their attorneys to go in front of an immigration judge. He was ordered deported. During those proceedings, he was also recognized as a gang member, and at the time of his arrest was involved with other gang members in a human trafficking event. And he was removed recently from the United States under the Alien Enemies Act, which the president asked DHS to implement, a law from quite a ways back, to be fair, but one that allows the president to determine that when our sovereignty is at stake, if we're being attacked by a foreign power or invaded by a foreign power, then immigration authorities, law enforcement, can arrest and remove people in that condition. He was removed under those conditions. He also, via the reporting, said that he had a withholding order from a judge, which said that he was in danger in going back to El Salvador because of his gang affiliation. So more than one judge said that he was involved in gang activity. He was sent to El Salvador on a flight that was commissioned by our government and was received in El Salvador's CICOT prison. He's still there now. Yesterday, I believe the Supreme Court ruled that he is in fact a deportable alien, and that that the Justice Department and DHS are required to do something as in facilitating his return. But the court did not order a return. It was a 9-0 verdict that said, yeah, he got his due process. He was removed from the country, even though there was a withholding order from El Salvador, not to be deported, but not to be deported to El Salvador. That's where the case is. Both presidents stated emphatically yesterday that they weren't going to let their citizen of El Salvador, Bukele said, they weren't going to let their citizen of El Salvador be returned to the United States. He's a native son of El Salvador. And he's also, by their law and our own, recognized as a terrorist.
So Mark, that's to me a distinguishing factor that the media is not letting us know, is that in the court order, they recognize him as a known gang member or admitted gang member. Is that fair?
Yeah, I believe that's fair. And to be honest with you, I'm not as up to speed on this particular case as Ron is, but that's my understanding. Correct.
Okay. So let me just kind of walk back for a second. Both of you guys have extensive decades-long experience in this. But just for people to understand this, it is on its face illegal to come into this country without a visa or through a port of entry. Is that a fair statement?
100%.
That's correct. 100%. It is a misdemeanor under United States Code 1325 to enter the United States illegally, other than in a port of entry. And it's just like your home. We welcome people into this country. Please just use the front door.
Right. But Mark, to that point, explain to people like what the last 4 years have been like, because my understanding is they walk up and they say, "Hi, I'm here. I'm claiming asylum." And then what would, in other words, are the people in the last 4 years technically here illegally, or did the Biden administration allow them, to your point, to come through maybe not the front door, but a side door and have status of some sort?
Yes, they allowed them to come across the border illegally. When they came across the border illegally, they process them and release them into the country. And so, that becomes a beacon for illegal immigration. If you're going to succeed, speaking to some of the Border Patrol agents at the time, they felt they were nothing more than a speed bump. And they were being pulled off of their border duties. The cartels were controlling the border. They would send, 100, 200, 300 across at once. And there is not a law enforcement agency in the United States, arguably in the world, that can deal with 300 arrests all at once. These individuals have to be searched. They have to make sure that they're medically sound. Any medical attention needs to be given to them. They have to have food and water. Biographical information has to be taken, and then they can be transported. So all of our patrol efforts were shut down to deal with those large groups when they came across. And at that point, then the cartels were the rest of the border was left unprotected, and the cartels were free to bring across what they really wanted, the precious cargo, the dangerous cargo, be it gang members, terrorists, fentanyl, was more or less danced across unimpeded.
Okay. So Ron, what has changed since President Trump came in on January 20th? I mean, Mark just described the process before, that these agents were, in many cases, felt like they were a speed bump on the way for people to come into the country. How has that process changed since January 20th of 2025?
Well, the nonsense is over. What Mark described allowed at least 11 million people, by government records, 11 million people that were encountered by CBP. That does not account for the millions that were probably not seen by law enforcement at the border. And on top of that, about 1.5 million or almost 2 million people in the abused parole system under Joe Biden, in which they encouraged people to sign up for a pre-approval parole in their own country and were flown into the United States, therefore not being seen by anybody in law enforcement, even after they arrived in the United States. So that was 11 plus million, probably closer to 20. And the nonsense is over. The traffic coming to the border is now not being released. They're being removed quickly if they're not being prosecuted. Sometimes both of that is happening. They're being addressed in federal court for their illegal activity or their prior criminal activity. Then they're quickly removed to places all over the country. No one is being released that comes into the hands of CBP or ICE at the border, or much less in the interior, and they're being removed quickly. So we went from 7,000 encounters at CBP a day during the last year of the Biden administration to less than 300 today. In the last 24 hours, that is like 270 average through the week. Encounters by CBP at the border. Gotaways are way down. No abuse of the parole system. So the men and women of the front line are now in control of the law enforcement assets, not the cartels, which was happening during the entirety of the Biden administration.
So, Mark, what is it that you attribute? I don't want to put, I have my theories, but why do you think those numbers are so low now?
Well, there was a narrative that was pushed in the past that said it required new laws. And with Ron, I will tell you, I am lockstep with him. We didn't need new laws. Our border security laws are pretty stinking good. Do they need to be tweaked? Maybe. But we needed a new president. We needed somebody in there with a backbone that was going to enforce the laws that were on the books. We don't write the laws. We don't create the laws. We're law enforcement officers. And so Congress writes the laws, a president signs them into effect, and then the law enforcement officers go out there and, like Lady Justice has a blindfold. We enforce those laws. We don't pick and choose who gets a pass, who we write the law arrest. We arrest those individuals and set them up for their due process in court, whatever that process may be. And that's the difference. Now we are enforcing those laws. We're not just giving anybody a parole because they just make a fictitious or a fraudulent claim to, some form of asylum or refugee status. And so now we see what happens when you have strong enforcement at the border and you're not going to be released. That beacon is put out to the world that the doors are no longer open for anybody to come into this country and abuse our system. There's going to be a legal process into entering this country. If you don't want to follow the legal process, there are going to be consequences. And this president has delivered those consequences through the men and women of the Border Patrol, CBP, ICE, and the Department of Justice, DOD. It's a whole government approach, and it has worked. And Ron and I have been worked for the Border Patrol for many, many years, decades. And I can tell you, we have never seen numbers this low in my lifetime. 41 years working in immigration enforcement, back starting in 1984. I've never seen numbers like this. I have never seen numbers like this. This is an absolute game changer, and we are doing it lawfully, legally, and it just took a president with a backbone.
You know, Ron, to Mark's point about the front door, if you start telling people that, hey, if you come to my house, I'm not going to let you in, but I don't lock the door and there's a lot of free stuff inside that's yours for the taking, they're going to come. And I felt like over the last 4 years, the vice president at that time, Kamala Harris, would say, don't, when she was asked what the message is. But then it was, but if you do, here's all the stuff we're going to give you. We're going to give you a phone. We're going to give you a hotel room. We're going to give you some spending cash. We're going to bring you into the country. We'll give you a social security number, a work permit, and then we'll give you a court date that's 5 or 6 years down the road that nobody really shows up for. So you kind of get to stay. And I feel like to what Mark was saying, that the signal was, we're not, it's like that street that no one patrols the speed on and everybody flies down because you know you're not going to get a ticket. And that was the difference more than the law. It was, if you're not going to enforce it, people just are going to come in. And now I think there's a fear that if I come, I'm going to get deported.
100%. You have the president, you have Tom Homan, you have Kristi Noem all talking about consequences for those that elect to come in and try to invade at the border. We all have, many of us have, an immigration story in our background. My mom was not born in this country. And so we have a generous legal immigration system. What this president done and the leadership of the department and the border czar's office is lock down the border, provide resources from the Department of Defense, prosecution resources from the Department of Justice, and all the interagency partners working, as Mark said, together to apply consequence. When you make people pay for their bad behavior, you get less bad behavior. And so the pipeline has been shrunk down 97%. That gives more bandwidth to the men and women on the front line to do their jobs effectively, arrest those that are still trying to invade, seize more narcotics, prosecute cases, rescue victims of human trafficking, and on and on and on. That workforce has been multiplied, as Mark said, in ways I've never seen it. The interagency is working in a seamless way in ways I've never seen it. All of this to apply a consequence to those that still break the law, make the border and its communities safer, thereby making the homeland safer.
You know, Mark, you've got over 3 decades of law enforcement experience. You noted that. You're now kind of teamed up with Tom Homan. And as a guy who's worked in these agencies and dealt with immigration, how is the dynamic that now you guys have like this border czar that works among, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth because I really don't know how you work, but how is that dynamic changed from just sort of doing the job at ICE or at CBP or under DHS? Like, how is the dynamic of you and Tom Homan as a border czar run out of the office enhanced or changed the process?
Well, I think it's a brilliant strategy by the president. He understands this is an immigration problem that transcends or connects through many different departments. So we have Health and Human Services, Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, all of these different entities. And so you have the different cabinet members that run each of those departments. And so to unify and bridge the gaps and have everybody working as a whole government approach to this invasion of our country and, the American citizens dying on our streets. You have Tom Homan with a vast amount of experience of immigration enforcement, law enforcement, and he bridges that gap. He brings all of those pieces together, working together in harmony as under the president's vision. And we have seen it works. I mean, it's a hell of a strategy that the president came up with, and putting Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, all of these individuals in these key positions, Pete Hegseth. I mean, this is a government I have not seen in my 4 decades, and it's just a brilliant strategy. Tom Homan is the right guy to kind of orchestrate all the cabinet members and bring them together. It's brilliant.
You know, Ron, I love how you kind of turned the CBP One app on its head. Just explain like what you guys did and how the reaction to it has been so far with people in the country.
Okay, as Mark said, the strategy is working. People know that they're in the pipeline. They're making a U-turn in the isthmus in Panama. They're going back home. And there are also people in the United States who are trying to avoid a knock on the door. So we saw them basically self-deporting, trying to flee into Canada and other locations. We took what was the abusive CBP One app and changed it over with the department's leadership to CBP Home, where people can go into the app, register with the government and say, hey, look, I need to go home. I want to go home. I want to avoid the knock on the door. And thousands of people have raised their hand inside that application. In the coming weeks, we're going to be able to verify that they departed without using other government systems. But in the app itself, it will tell us where they are in the world. So it took the abuse of the parole system under the Biden administration and turned it on its head and turned it into an application that allows people to request help in self-deporting or reporting themselves to the government or telling us they're going to leave and telling us when and how.
So when they leave, though, Ron, is that like a way? I saw Kristi Noem has these ads on, and she says, like, if you leave now, there's a chance. So is that an effort to get them to say, I want to come back maybe legally, so I'm going to show you as an act of good faith that I'll leave right now under my own accord?
Yes, there's consequences if they cross the border illegally. There's also consequences if they stay in the country illegally. And so those have all been lined out. And she is encouraging people with these ads that are not only in the U.S., but are now global, that deters people from getting in the pipeline, coming to the country illegally, but also encourages those here to raise their hand and avoid the knock at the door.
Mark,
and Sean, I might just jump in here, and to Ron's point, legally there are legal consequences if somebody is removed by ICE, formally deported, and based upon what the charges are on that deportation, there are legal bars to their re-entry into the United States. So if they self-deport, if they leave before the government has to come and impose those legal consequences on them, then they stand a better chance at making a lawful entry back into the country. But if ICE has to go out and they have to be removed by the order of an immigration judge, then they're going to have a much, much more difficult time in making a reapplication for a lawful admission into the country just because of those illegal bars. So it's in the benefit of the alien to seek to remove themselves if they ever have a hope to come back lawfully.
So let's say that hypothetically, Bob Smith self-deports to, let's just say, Mexico, and then wants to take a family vacation to the United States. He wants to go to Florida. Can they walk on? Could they come up, show a passport, or get on a plane and come to America again, or are they barred for a certain period of time? I guess I'm trying to figure that out. Like, I'm still always amazed at why people just don't overstay a visa versus come in illegally. But if that person's self-deported, could they get on a plane and go on vacation in Montana or something?
Yeah, it would depend upon under what circumstances they remove themselves. There may be a 1-year bar, there may be a 5-year bar, 20-year bar, or there may be none if they remove before proceedings. So yes, they could, but they would have to go in and apply for a visa. And if they were granted that visa, a B2, a visitor for pleasure, like a tourist visa, yeah, there would be no issue, and it would be highly more likely to obtain that visa if they self-removed rather than ICE going out and knocking on their door and putting them in handcuffs and escorting. Then at that point, that door was probably going to be closed. Or say somebody has a girlfriend that's an American citizen. At one point down the road, they want to, engage in a contract of marriage under the love. And then that American citizen wants to petition for them to come in as a spouse of a U.S. citizen. That's an avenue. That's an avenue to get a lawful resident alien status. But if they're removed, there's going to be a bar. There's going to be problems.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.